Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Legat Architects Think Tank 2020, Resilience. My name is Jeff Sronkowski, and I am Principal and Director of Higher Education at Legat Architects, and I'm also the firm's chairman. A bit of background about Legat Architects. Legat is a design practice specializing in planning, architecture, and interior design. Our firm's portfolio includes commercial, governmental, healthcare, higher education, hospitality, mixed use, pre-K-12 education, and transportation facilities. A bit of background about the think tank. Think Tank is an annual symposium orchestrated by Legat Architects. Each year we invite authorities from a variety of disciplines to speak about trends related to their areas of expertise, as well as how to design impacts for those fields. In recent years, the symposium has featured discussions about biophilic and sustainable design, health and welfare, school safety, urban sprawl, and many other timely topics. During last year's event, the think tank partnered with Chicago Architecture Biennial and was featured on Arc Daily, Bustler, and in Architectural Products magazine. This year's topic is resilience. In ecology, resilience implies the capacity of an ecosystem to respond to disturbance or invasion by recovering quickly, adapting to change, and then evolving and to thrive rapidly. In this year of radical change, resilience is imperative to survival of not just architects and designers, but also the human race. Finally, as a reminder, this session counts for one AIA Continuing Education Credit Learning Unit. In order to receive a certificate of completion for attending, please leave your name and AIA number in the chat, and we'll record those and send you a certificate next week. Without further ado, I'd like to present the speaker for today's session. Dina Sorensen is founder and design director of d.studio. She's also co-chair of the Committee on Architecture for Education Research Subcommittee. Dina is an award-winning, nationally recognized K-12 education designer, strategist, public speaker, and author with a notable background for achievement in the design of healthy, high-performance schools. Dina's unique background in the arts, architecture, and interdisciplinary research informs a holistic approach to designs for learning that stimulate well-being and creativity. Dina's commitment to interdisciplinary exploration drives the development of advantageous frameworks for innovation in architecture and applicable research for future-forward designs. Fluent in all aspects of educational philosophy, Dina's penchant for seeing through the eyes of a child, I love that, gives priority to what activates learning environments for all learners by design. Dina's passion is to combine architecture, lived experiences, and well-designed affordances to support learning diversity now and into the future. She's pioneered significant contributions to school architecture and public health, resulting in the development of her first ever health promotion design guidelines for school architecture. Projects of note include the most livable building in the US, the Bluestone Elementary School in Harrisburg, Virginia, which achieved the Living Buildings Award from USC Berkeley for the built environment, and the health promoting James M. McConnell Award finalist for the Carter G. Woodson Education Complex in Dillwyn, Virginia. And lastly, the American Institute of Architects Committee on the Environment Top 10 Award winner for the Discovery Elementary School, the largest net zero energy school in Arlington, Virginia. Dina is co-chair of the National AIA Committee on Architecture for Education, the Subcommittee for Research, and founder, editor of Dialogues, Emerging Research at the Intersection of Designs for Learning, published annually by Learning by Design, VS America, and the AIA Committee on Architecture for Education Foundation. With all of that, here is Dina Sorensen. Dina.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you for having me. Welcome, everybody. It's a rainy day here. I have a ginormous cup of coffee. I hope you have one too. And we're going to go ahead and dive into this exploration on resilience. Let me just get this going here. There we go. So the title today is Ecology as Antidote, and really looking at human resilience as opposed to ecological resilience. And in past think tanks, I've had the pleasure of being a provocateur. And today I hope to do the same by inviting us to take up the mantle of resilience and use it in our daily lives. We should all care about resilience because now we have over 50 million students of all ages trying to make sense of the many threats to climate and health. I know as educators, we want our students to thrive and be engaged in shaping the world for the better. And I know what unites us as designers. We all want to create places that inspire and lift up, heal and restore, and are truly valued by the communities we serve. And so in preparing for this talk, I was imagining if we were all to take up the mantle of resilience, it would probably look a little bit different for each of us as to what resilience is. And without a common vision for resilience in schools, we put a whole generation of opportunities to connect human resilience with ecological resilience at stake. And we know from our own lives, we can no longer afford to pass this up. So today I'm excited to share about resilience to encourage us to put the human at the center of what we do. Because no matter what industry or sector you're in, there's always a human in there somewhere. And promoting human resilience by design really means strengthening the connections between culture, climate, and place. So people are empowered to transform and adapt to extreme changes by tapping into their unique cultural strengths and identities. So today I'm going to share about human resilience, and I'm going to show you some amazing examples from around the world and give you 3 actions you can take today to begin to have these conversations within your communities. But first, I wanted to encourage you to use the chat space to share your own ideas and reflections or things that come to mind as we provoke the learning as we go. So to paint a clear picture of human resilience that truly inspires us to widen the conversation about the role of school design, I want to start with an ecological model that orients the learner at the center. And this is Uri Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory model that is still very present and used today in all kinds of disciplines. He's most known as the co-founder of the National Head Start program. And he passed away, but is widely regarded as one of the world's leading scholars in developmental psychology, child rearing, and human ecology, really the interdisciplinary domain that he created. And as a result of this groundbreaking concept of the ecology of human development, these environments that are interrelated from the family to the economic to the political structures were really viewed as part of the life course, embracing both childhood and adulthood. His bioecological approach to human development really shatters barriers among the social sciences, and it bridges disciplines that have allowed findings to emerge about which key elements in the larger social structure and across societies are truly vital for developing the potential of human nature, which is really the backbone of human resilience. And this shouldn't be a huge stretch of the imagination, imagining that theory coming to life, when as adults, we've been called out by young people around the world who are engaging in global advocacy efforts. Resilience in education looks like youth activists affecting international policymaking, including crucial environmental issues. It's a real-life manifestation of his bioecological model, when the most intimate, threatening issues move to the broadest concern. In this case, students are leading the charge. So how do we as designers and educators help to orient our communities to become more immersed in where they live, putting young people in control of their choices as agents of transformational or adaptive change, to become more resilient in a sense? Knowing Uri's framework helps unite all of us and also helps to reimagine learning experiences that combine these levels of influence and maintain the learner at the center. And a great example of this is the Learning Barge project by Chrisman Petrus Architects. As an environmental center a community asset, and not confined to a school district. It is an equal access opportunity to bring awareness, stewardship, and engagement to a coastal waterway under threat. So to make a distinction between the variations of resilience, from social resilience, cultural resilience, ecological resilience, human resilience, in the research literature, it's widely adopted through this definition of human resilience, and this is the one I'm proposing we adopt for schools. The capacity of a system to undergo change while still maintaining the same structure, functions, and feedbacks, therefore identity. This definition is really crucial because it calls us to truly engage in multiple perspectives meaningfully with the intent to enhance and promote human resilience among those who are living it. And it's always been proven through research and just daily life. Resilience is best understood by the people who are living it. It's not an abstract concept. So take Autumn Peltier, a 14-year-old Canadian national member of the Wikwemikong First Nation. She ignited a youth-led movement for the universal right to clean drinking water in 2018. What sets her advocacy apart is a clear focus on Indigenous knowledge and the collective rights of Indigenous peoples who are disproportionately affected by water and sanitation issues. She said, "There are people living in third world conditions in our first world country." Peltier is an integral part of the subtle revolution of asserting collective rights of Indigenous peoples and protecting transnational Indigenous ways of being on the global stage. And take Ruth Miller, an Alaskan-born youth advocate for Indigenous-led climate justice. Echoed in a recent interview, she said, "Climate justice should include first and foremost the voices of the people who will be affected by climate change the most." And I do not see that happening in the majority of international rhetoric at the moment. As a member of the Dena Athabaskan tribe, Miller represented the United Nations Association of the United States, where she said to that group, "The world is at this breaking point because of the few people who are in power and the few corporations that have built their profits through the exploitation of the many." And she asserted, if we're talking about reform, if we're talking about change, it's not the responsibility of the individuals who've been victimized by these global processes. With her actions and rhetoric, Miller represents the confluence of the global Indigenous rights movement and the youth-led protest movement for climate justice. So these stories serve a purpose as examples of human resilience. It speaks to the lived experience of a life-threatening experience, and it's in situations of extreme adversity. So what calls our attention to human resilience, as opposed to focusing on ecological resilience, are the harsh environments that challenge species survival and interconnected social, ecological, and socio-cultural sustainability challenges. So these young women illustrate the diversity of young people engaged in this transnational climate advocacy, and they really illustrate the first hallmark trait of human resilience: wisdom prevailing over knowledge, production, and use. So after all, it is young people with most of their lives before them who will be much more affected by climate change than most of us at our age, and a lot of the older people who are formulating policies on the issue. Similarly, Indigenous people's livelihoods, due to their reliance on natural resources, will be threatened by the climate crisis long before many other groups will feel the brunt of those changes to come. And a lot of people have been calling for all of us to finally start listening to these youth-led movements and take their voices into account for change. And so the dynamics of human resilience reflect these complex adaptive systems in which human actions, influence the systems and the subsystems in which they were embedded. So it's that deep level of adaptation. So just remember, adaptation as one component of resilience is dependent on these interactions. And another great example of human resilience adaptation across these multiple layers of society, if you remember that model, ecological model, is the Tofani Tribe. To avoid being captured and sold into slavery by the Fon ethnic group of the Doheny Kingdom in the 17th century, the Tofani Tribe literally moved their entire village into a lake. According to the guide who contributed to this research paper, and they were moving through the village on the small boat, it was described that the Tofani knew very deeply what the belief system, cultural belief system was of the Fon, the ethnic group that was going to eventually overtake them. And so rather than, waiting around to be attacked, they took to living on a body of water because they knew in that cultural sense that they would never be attacked there. So they began building their homes and eventually stores, schools, clinics, and a church in the lake. So in other words, their thoughtful reflection on the threat facing them and their collective willingness to adapt to a totally different way of life is what allowed them to survive. The village, which still exists today and is on the tentative list, it may have made the list for the UNESCO World Heritage Site, was named Ganvi, which in the Tofinu language roughly translates to the saved community. So that brings us to a broader, more holistic definition of human resilience, defined as the capacity of individuals, families, communities, systems, and institutions to anticipate, withstand, and/or judiciously engage with catastrophic events and/or experiences, and actively making meaning with the goal of maintaining normal function without fundamental loss of identity. So identity, next to wisdom, remains a key hallmark trait of human resilience. And what it signals to us as designers and educators is the deep need to understand the catastrophic events from the perspective of members of the affected community, not from the outside, but to really generate those first-person narratives, especially in terms of people's experiences relating to meaning and identity. So one useful construct in human resilience is the notion of resilience pivots. And it was introduced by a research team in 2014 to highlight the elements of a particular community or group that remain constant through an adverse event. So typically we think of human resilience, adaptation, and transformation as adopting and changing the system. In this case, they were studying there must be some component that remains constant, otherwise nothing would be recognizable as it was to its identity. So a great example is the population of the southern region of Senegal known as the Casamance. They've been living through a low-level civil war for multiple decades, experiencing periodic bursts of violence from the ongoing conflict between the local separatist movement and the national government in Dakar. And in a research paper, the author, in his account with a visitor in 2005, spent time with a local man from the Diola ethnic group, who explained that while the people of the region had suffered, the conflict actually reinforced their cultural identity as a distinct group with egalitarian structure and a sense of pride in resisting centralized authority, which is a narrative extending back to the time of the French colonial rule. So transformational change, as distinct from adaptive change at a local or specific level, can contribute to resilience at a larger scale or in a broader context. Think of it as intentional transformational change, which we also see amazingly exemplified at the school in Nepal, in which sustainability was no longer enough. The design brief, how can we co-create a pulse of hope after the devastating earthquakes of 2015, which destroyed many of the Purano Jangajoli's buildings, including the village's local education center. And rather than intervening and rebuilding like for like, the Friends of Nepal Association wanted to reimagine what was possible. They decided to use this development as an opportunity to facilitate courageous conversations about who the community was, and more importantly, who they wanted to become, FONA also used this process to reinvent themselves, exploring how they could best facilitate genuine co-creation in this remarkable opportunity. The project is one of the first in the world to interweave the principles of benefit mindset, a regenerative paradigm evoking an entirely different mindset and attitude to shift away from worries of scarcity, loss, failure, and catastrophe toward collaboration, abundance, and prosperity. So resilience at this transformational level sees regeneration as an active part of the living world in which human resilience enhances the quality of ecosystems and by improving, not just sustaining, the sociological, cultural, and economic health of a place. So one of the collective realizations that came out of this process was the strength of the local culture's environmental and agricultural values. They saw their culture living in partnership with the land. And their dream was for a building that not only expressed and celebrated these values, but also played a valuable role in strengthening and elevating them. And this led to a design response that nourishes a range of mutually beneficial partnerships between people and place. And right here at home, designing learning experiences that give kids the opportunity to immerse in issues they care about and translate their findings to the direct impact of the school ecologies they inhabit. In this case, a small leftover piece of the woods on the school grounds, is such a powerful start to meaningful human resilience in building those skill sets. So knowing these hallmark traits of human resilience, wisdom, agency, and transformation, we can begin to take up the mantle of resilience to move schools forward with these three actions. Wisdom over knowledge, engaging in first-person narratives, letting that wisdom speak to the process and to the design. A lot of times we come in with overarching frameworks, and this is suggesting we start with the people who live it out every day. Emphasize the human in human. A lot of times these abstract theories can dehumanize the local experience of something as devastating and impactful as climate change. And implicit in the discussion of human resilience is the role of agency. How do we design to allow people, how to empower them to make choices for adaptation or transformation? And third, are generating narratives of human resilience to fuel the sustainability of interconnected health and social systems across cultures like we just saw in Nepal. So a lot of these conversations that we can now reconstruct around human resilience take us much deeper into the human experience of people and place. So using this mantle of resilience in our everyday lives means having heartfelt conversations with people in your communities, working together to prioritize human resilience that encourages our social capacity to thrive. And it's in this picture of resilience as a deeply rooted cultural heritage that strengthens the connections between culture, climate, and place, so people are empowered to transform and adapt using their unique cultural strengths and identities. And so that was just a little taster on human resilience to get us started and to get everyone primed to delve deeper and take us on wherever you sit around the country and the world. I would love for you to stay in touch on this, and I can share additional resources. And one thing I would love for you to walk away with today is talking to your colleagues and your clients and your kids. How can we, in what ways can we start redesigning or designing for human resilience? How can that make a positive impact on our design process? Will it change it? And what will our designs for learning look like as a result of promoting human resilience? So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Dina. So we'll look on the Q&A here and see what questions we have for you. So, Here's one question. How can we take one step forward today?
So when I started to work on this specific topic, I realized very quickly that there is a body of research around resilience. And even within that domain, there were people who were calling for a common vision, a common definition. And so within that, the research, I mean, there's a lot of strands of research around resilience, but I think everybody did agree that unless we have a common vision and definition, it's hard to actually get started because it's a big buzzword right now, resilience. And I think the way to get started is to study that definition that I proposed, talk about it, think about adopting it, because within that definition, there are measurable key performance indicators, so to speak. You should be able to go into any design proposal and identify the human resilience factors and talk about that with clients. And even after the project is built, you should be able to go back in there and evaluate if they've been effective. So I think starting with the definition of human resilience as opposed to other forms of resilience is really, really important for design.
It's a great suggestion. Here's another question that came in. And I know you gave some examples of this, but how can we incorporate resilient practices into first world educational design?
I think to keep it simple and keeping it in those bigger chunks of wisdom over knowledge, adaptation, and transformation is a way to start anchoring strategies. Because again, resilience is about these very complex systems that are interrelated. You can never find a silver bullet or even five, right? It's about it's dynamism. It's just constantly changing. So I think wisdom, adaptation, and transformation are things you can define and you can actually identify through these case studies and real life examples of what that looks like. And I think that's the most important thing to study and to get to know and to embody. So when you enter an interview or a conversation with a client or a community that has deep concerns about something, you can distinguish between those three opportunities. You're not going to sit down the first time you meet someone and say, hey, let's transform your ecosystem. They're going to be like, get out of here, you know? But if you say, hey, tell me some stories. What is on your heart? What's been your struggle here in this community? How can we bring 10 more people to the table to talk as well so we can get those multiple points of view? And just starting with that heartfelt conversations, wisdom culture, and then build up from there.
That's good advice. Okay, here's another question. What are some of the typical roadblocks to a more resilient approach in the educational system today? Roadblocks.
Oh yeah. So the classic roadblocks are we have benevolent, amazing leaders in education, and they move around a lot. So when you're blessed to work with a great team, you might be mid-project and then they have incredible opportunities elsewhere. And while the relationship continues, the project mechanisms, you know, they change over to new leaders. And so that continuity to fulfill these more robust strategies can be lost in that translation. So one roadblock is just changing leadership. I mean, I think everybody in our world wants to design and build the most resilient places where kids can thrive. But it does take a little bit of a deeper commitment and investment in what those strategies might look like, because they're not just short-term, they're long-term investments. And so we need leaders to, you know, stay with us on that whole journey from start and then past the finish line. And so that just makes it, I think that's the biggest roadblock is, you know, you're with your champions and your champions change and you kind of have to reboot.
Okay, thank you. I just want to remind everyone we've got a little bit of time here, so please. This is a great engagement that we're having with Dina right now, and I know you have more questions, and she has all the answers. And so please submit a few more questions if you would. And while you're doing that, here's the next question, Dina. So you showed lots of instances of K-12 examples of resilience. How do we apply these lessons learned to higher education?
Well, I don't have any answers, but I am talking a lot, sharing a lot, thinking very deeply about the moment that we're in, which is the unfolding of a story of human resilience in education and global health. Higher education is, currently a hot spot on many levels, not just for the pandemic. It's a hot spot of wonderings. What's the future of higher education? Is it affordable for all? Once you start to unpack higher education, there are probably 12 factors of resilience that you could start to play out in multiple directions. And I think higher education, again, these are complex institutions. A lot of people who contribute to projects are sitting in different departments, and it's very difficult to get a holistic point of view about what a project can achieve, again, on those big transformational capacities. And yet higher education, most campuses have the capability of doing transformational resilient work because they are semi-contained systems that have a lot of positive levers to direct toward better health, better learning, better communities. It's just hard to get everyone out of their silos working on the same thing, which is transformational resilience at a scale that affects a community. Whereas individual schools, they don't have as much authority and power to leverage that capacity for change. They might do it more at the local level of the school building. But campuses, small, medium, and large, have enormous opportunity that I think is untapped.
Okay, we've got a few more questions that have come in here. How can we inform our clients about the need for resilience, and are there some simple steps to follow to accomplish this?
Let's see. Well, I would love this to be a call for all of us here to start creating this framework for human resilience. I have a concern that the majority of our profession is moving toward the ecological model, and that's a focus on ecologies, not necessarily the human interaction piece. So I think we're in this moment, and thank you for the think tank focused on this issue, because I think maybe tomorrow we can talk about it as a panel. I think we're on the verge of having to create some kind of framework that is applicable in this industry, that can really galvanize clients, give them a roadmap for their success, and help designers start to create new processes that enable and empower the clients to go in that direction. I don't think it exists yet. It's there, it's out there floating, but it's not cohesive. And if you look at the profile of a firm, we need more ambassadors of resilience, for example, people from different disciplines leading the charge within design professions and helping us move toward that model.
Okay, thank you. Next question, have you had the opportunity to apply human resilience to a recent or past project? If so, what was the impact?
Yeah, I would cite, because the project that was mentioned that I was really blessed to work on with the team at the MDO Architects, that's the Buckingham Primary and Elementary School. That really stands out as a project of resilience, not just ecological, but human. In that it really, well, first we partnered with public health researchers and a pediatrician to really look at community health. We also had a research project, a 2-year longitudinal study to really test out what those design guidelines might look like once it's applied to architecture for schools. And in and of itself, it's a complete project. It has design, it has research, it has findings. And in that project, we were really studying what the role of architecture is in helping to reverse the epidemic of childhood obesity. How do we design schools that are active, promoting movement, healthy eating, and just a real solid culture of health? And so I would say that while that project is small but mighty, it's contributed some evidence to the science of health, as well as to education and design. So it's very robust and in that sense, resilient.
Thank you. All right, next question. As of yesterday, Portland, Oregon was said to have had the worst air quality on the planet, being attributed to the horrendous forest fires. One side says forests need better management to reduce fire risks, while other sides blame it on global warming. How can the disagreeing, broken political system get through the BS and actually help solve the real life problem now?
Well, 2 days ago, my sister and niece flew here out of Portland, Oregon. Is that a sign of human resilience? I don't believe it is. I think it's a reaction to a lack of cohesion on how to respond to climate change with transformational strategies. And I wanted to show the examples today of communities and cultures that may not be Western, but they've galvanized their communities around a strong sense of identity, wisdom, and survival, and they made profound changes to thrive, not survive. Profound changes. I mean, moving your entire village to live in a lake, you know, is profound transformational change for thriving, not surviving. I just wish I have hope. I have hope that we will be pressured and threatened so much by these secondary threats of climate change that we will be forced into the role of adaptive change. Maybe not transformational yet, but our systems will have to adapt if there's no way out, right? Especially with these fires that Australia has suffered as well, and many other places. So again, these are complex questions. They're heart-wrenching experiences. I'm kind of falling apart in an answer because it's very emotional too. I think, yeah, we need to help ourselves. We need to get past that. We need to move toward that regenerative model, that paradigm where we're not focused on scarcity, loss, catastrophic change. We're focused on prosperity, collaboration, cooperation, and generation. So I think that's at the grassroots level. Every teacher can teach that. Every parent can reinforce it. As friends to each other, we can lift each other up.
Very heartfelt, Dina, thank you. You mentioned hope. And so the next question is, you mentioned a pulse of hope. Can you talk more about what that means to you and to moving forward with transformation in design?
Yeah. Well, I've had an interesting, I'll just add a little personal antidote. I took a big leap and went on a short sabbatical. And while I wasn't in practice, focusing all those hours on projects, I had a lot of time to think big picture. And I was also inspired to get out into the community and help where help was needed. So I think that pulse of hope comes from the beautiful facets of the design world, which is contributing a way of thinking, a way of being, and a way of making and doing, not just to the projects we're commissioned to do, but the communities that we live in and serve. And so I think the pulse of hope literally starts with a pulse of looking around and saying who needs what and bringing those beautiful design skills we have into the community to take action. One example of that is, building school gardens where there weren't any before, taking ownership of leftover space that people have abandoned around some places of urban blight. I'll go in there and prune the shrubs and pick up the trash, and I don't know, Impulsive Hope is doing to me, just getting out there and doing and contributing and showing people what design can look like in the everyday world.
Thank you. Next question is one that I had as well. So can you expand on the idea of wisdom over knowledge?
Yeah, so that is encouraging to me because it helps, especially those of us who have expertise in school design, where you get to work with children, adults, just a very wide range of people at different stages of growth and development. So to me, wisdom over knowledge is a deep listening practice. It's engaging with people who are inhabiting spaces and places, have stories to tell. Within the stories, within the everyday lived experience, there's knowledge that needs to come forth through that wisdom portal. And so how we structure our design process or participatory design process can really allow for those stories to see the light of day and move into more of a design realm. So wisdom over knowledge is also maybe a source of humility, coming in as a listener versus coming in and saying, hey, this framework is telling us to do this. Just start with what's happening in your life. Let's have a cup of coffee. Tell me more about it. And then if there's an opening, you can share a little bit of your dose of expertise where you think it might make a difference. But I think listening first is allowing that wisdom to shine and allowing people to own the issues in their communities and therefore the change as well.
We all work with clients, so here's a question about clients. Can you give examples of questions you would ask a client to get the conversation started about human resilience in relation to their project?
Yeah. Well, again, I'm going to call all of you to have fun with this. I think we need like a resilience play deck. I haven't seen one yet. If you know of it, tell me about it. Because I was thinking about this. How do we start to break down the term for people who have, extreme pressure running schools and stuff? Resilience, it seems like this abstract concept. So we need some type of play deck that allows people to engage with resilience factors in a way that they can see it in their own lives playing out every day. So for example, if you look at school lunch, you can talk about school lunch, or you can look at all the systems and mechanisms and operations that go into making it happen. And within that, you'll find human resilience factors all along that slipstream. But clients might not be thinking that way about it. They're just thinking, how do I get food from here to here in the kid's mouth? So we have to bring new resources, and new methods to make resilience just an everyday way of deepening that ability to adapt and transform as change is inevitable and bound to happen, especially in this day and age. So we don't want to leave our clients shortchanged without the strategies to adapt or to transform as they need to. So by design, we enable and empower them to be able to act on those needs when they arise.
So does that mean to be able to look through the lens of resilience? So we need to develop these tools so that our clients can look through that lens.
Yeah, I used to call it anticipatory infrastructure, which is like, that's engineers can see what that means. So we already pump a lot of infrastructure into projects that is connecting them to energy, water, all these different systems.
Yeah.
If you anticipate, infrastructure. You're looking way downstream. Your horizon line is defined by the team. It could be next week, next year, 5 years. We're always anticipating the lifespan and the life cycle of infrastructure and the systems that need to keep operating. That is resilience in and of itself, right? So I think, again, terminology, language, definitions, they do matter. But if we just think broadly about what kind of anticipatory infrastructure needs to occur to empower people to adapt and transform as those threatening changes approach.
So we have some homework to do then.
We have, yeah, I don't have the answers, definitely, but I'm excited because I think this is the, well, here we are, our profession kind of has to deal with it, right? We have to adapt and transform also to what people need and communities need, and they need this type of holistic thinking and processes.
Okay, a few more questions. When trying to build consensus around an issue related to a human-centric approach, when should be the inflection point from discussion to action? When should it be?
Well, it's a good question. It made me think of two things. I'll answer that. But first, I had a flashback to a transformational moment in decision-making with a client. And the way we got there together was to make, for example, to make health personal. And what we realized over time is anytime these very hard issues that seem abstract and too big to wrestle with become personal in your own backyard, in your own family, in the classroom next to you, then people will want to listen. They will want to work together to solve that problem. So I think at any point in decision making or understanding, when you're working with people with different agendas and diverse points of view, getting to the heart of the matter and what matters in a person's life is way more powerful than what matters in, for example, a system's life, you know? And so you can have small acts of design that have a huge impact because you're focused on that local condition, that local area of change, that local drive to make something better. So small things add up to big things. And I would say just look for the small thing that someone can really put their heart into and understand and latch onto. Try to bring it down to the everyday personal, and then look for that opening to connect and empathize and see what someone else's ideas are in order to move forward.
Thank you. Okay, next question. I like your comment about diverse professions and researchers impacting design. Can you give an example of a research project that was a collaboration of a diverse team and the impact it has had to design?
Let's see. There are, well, we need more examples of that. So the evidence base in school research it's there, but it's not that deep in some domains, like public health, where architects and researchers are collaborating together on the design as well as the research. So one example is, I think some of the work coming out of neuroscience. I know it seems like a far stretch, but I think there's some good funding for that specific area of research. I think there's more funding for, you know, the frontier of the brain and what those intersections look like with architecture and all kinds of other things. So I would say if we look a little deeper into, for example, ANFA, which is having a current conference now, there are a lot of topics and papers and research teams that are combining architects, psychologists, and, for example, neuroscientists to really tackle the built environment and look at it from a different lens. I have a lot of resources. People can reach out and I can share the bibliography of those case studies. Okay.
And one final question. what can corporate America do to support resilient practices in the third world areas that you showed earlier?
There are two sites that I like. One is the Alliance for Resilience, the Resilience Alliance, and that has the most robust tools and intersections to delve into it. It runs the gamut from human resilience to adaptive systems and, adaptive management processes. It really captures the whole complex system. And in that, you'll find a lot of different organizations and agencies that are contributing. There's also an organization that tracks the spending of corporations and countries on climate change initiatives. It's a climate change watch group that quantifies all those investments, and you can see where things are being invested around the world. Corporations, I think my recommendation would be to, again, kind of adopt one of the leading definitions of resilience and commit to it. And then I would look at, who you can add to the team to be the leader of those resilient strategies at the corporate level. I think you need a lot of discussion to realize what that might mean when it aligns with corporate culture and corporate values and how it can be best expressed. I would say there's probably not very many limitations on how it can be expressed depending on the corporate values, but at least try one. At least pick one area that aligns with resilience strategies and maybe commit to that community or to that issue to learn more and to dig deeper.
Thank you, Dina. And that concludes all of our questions. And so on behalf of Legat Architects, I would really like to thank you, Dina, for this enlightening hour that you shared with us. And I have to say, out of all the speakers we've had this week, this is the one where we've had the most time to actually engage with, with the speaker and ask questions. And so that was great. It was a great introduction as well. So thank you. Thank you. With that, a few housekeeping things. I'd like to encourage everyone to save any questions that we didn't get to for the roundtable. Tomorrow, Dina will be part of that roundtable as well as the other speakers that we had earlier this week. And so it's at the same time tomorrow at noon. And again, you will receive AI learning units for this. So if you haven't done so already, please send an email to Justin Banda at jbanda@legat.com, and he will make sure that it's recorded. Tomorrow's roundtable will be hosted by Kurt Volkman, and we're really looking forward to your comments there, Dina, and the other speakers as well. And I would like to remind everybody as well that we have been receiving donations for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, and as of today, we're up to $1,802, and that amount will be matched by Legat Architects. And so please keep donating, and thank you for those who have donated already. And with that, this concludes our think tank sessions for today. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Have a great day. Bye.